Welcome to Conversations with Melissa. This is a RenaFi sponsored event. So let's say a little bit about our sponsor. Thank you so much, RenaFi, for making this possible. RenaFi provides research-based practical education. At RenaFi, we teach about the underlying drivers of our behavior. That knowledge leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to an improved quality of life. Welcome, Zara Harris. Zara is an experienced occupational therapist who's worked with children, teens, and adults with ADHD and related conditions for over 25 years. She's worked in schools and private practices in 7 countries. She's so international. She currently teaches students of occupational and physical therapy in Haiti. She has published many articles on ADHD and related topics in Attention magazine and also occupational therapy publications. She serves on the editorial advisory board of Attention magazine, that's a CHAD publication, and she's a member of the conference planning committee managing the on-site volunteers. She's presented on ADHD and occupational therapy in England, France, Germany, South Africa, Argentina, and around the US. And just this last week, she was in Paris, France. So without further ado, welcome, Zara. Thank you so much for coming to my show.
It's a great pleasure. It's a great pleasure. Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon. I don't know where you are in the States, but I'm on the East Coast, so it's good evening.
Yay. Well, we're very hungry. I mean, a lot of people have seen What Can You Learn About ADHD? What kind of treatment can you get from mental health providers? Then there's the conversation around ADHD specific coaching. And very little is said about orientation, the occupational therapy. And it looks like it's super practical. So there was a story when we were preparing for this about driving, about staying awake while driving that I thought was really insightful.
Well, one part of the ADHD toolbox is an understanding of our sensory systems. And we are pretty well, we understand pretty well how children can be sensitive to, in a different way, to sensations, but we don't really think about them very often with adults. But one of the ways of trying to understand this is imagine yourself driving a car and it's dark and it's late, it's getting late and you're beginning to feel a bit sleepy. And I don't know about you, but I've done a lot of long distance driving and my biggest fear is that I will fall asleep at the wheel. Think about what you would be doing if you're in the car and you're beginning to feel, just a bit sort of sleepy. What would you do? Would you maybe wind down the window to get some colder air on your face? Or would you perhaps turn on the radio or whatever music thing you have on your phone or whatever? What sort of music would you listen to? I mean, this is not the moment for a lullaby. If you want something perhaps to jolly you up, but what sort of music would you do? What else would you do? Would you maybe swig a cup of coffee in the knowledge that the caffeine is going to help you stay awake? What are some of those things? Well, I would suggest that everybody's going to be slightly different. Everyone's going to have their own particular little routines and recipes for what they would do. But I certainly went down the window to get some colder air on my face. Why? Because the cold air and the rush of the wind is giving a sensory jolt to my skin, my face, my part of my body that it touches. So we're using a sensory input there to try to make us more alert. I would probably put on the radio. If I'm trying to stay awake, my choice of music would be something I would sing along to. a musician. I like to listen to really good music, but that's not the moment for a, a symphony or whatever. Something that I could sing along to, perhaps. And then my secret weapon, I've done this for years, and it took me a long time to understand this, but I always carry those very strong tasting mints in my car. And I would almost certainly at this point pop one of those really strong mints in my mouth. And I used to think that it was a bit of sugar to kind of wake me up. But I now realize it's nothing to do with the sugar. It's the strong minty taste. You know what it's like when you have one of those mints and then you open your mouth and go, you have suddenly this real jolt in your mouth. Well, that's another sensory stimulation. It's the sensory stimulation of that strong mint that wakes me up. So that would be the sorts of things I would do. But I think if you look at what you would do, you'll probably realize that you have been doing things in this situation for years to do just this, to keep you awake or alert. It may be that you need to chew on something that's crunchy, or suck on an ice cube, or anyway, everybody, I think, if they think about themselves, they would discover that there is a something that they do to help control their level of alertness. And that, after all, with ADHD is a lot of what we're talking about, or what are the challenges are, is how to maintain what we call optimal alertness. So to drive a car, you need to have optimal alertness. You don't want to be overstimulated and you don't want to be understimulated. You need to have this optimal alertness. And that's true in so many things that we do in life. And one of the issues that we find with people with ADHD is that they really find it hard to maintain that optimal alertness. And it's as if they swing too quickly from being overstimulated and maybe frenzied or anxious, or to being understimulated and being bored and sleepy, or just not wanting to do it. And it seems with ADHD that we swing way more than perhaps other people do, and that it's very hard to kind of maintain that optimal level of alertness. And what Melissa and I were talking about was, are there things that we can do if we understand our own sensory systems, our own individual sensory systems, that can help us maintain that optimal level of alertness? We know that there are things that'll distract us. We know that, if you are in a classroom and you're sitting by the window, it's much easier to look out the window perhaps than to watch the teacher and what the teacher is doing. So we know that our sensory system can distract us readily, but can we use our sensory system to help us maintain this optimal level of alertness in whatever it is that we're trying to do?
We have a question in the chat. I'm just gonna, it's a little bit, I'm gonna read it because it's so well thought out. I believe I have dyspraxia, developmental coordination disorder that affects everything from my dancing skills to my speech. Are there activities that can help?
So let me just explain a little bit about what that is and the relationship to ADHD. The biggest part of my life, I've worked in pediatrics in school systems, and I very quickly discovered that ADHD is very often what we call comorbid, or co-occurs with what you quite rightly refer to as developmental coordination disorder, which used to be called dyspraxia, and at some point was even called the clumsy child syndrome. And they are two distinctive issues. The developmental coordination disorder and the ADHD but they co-occur very, very commonly. And some research I've read, it's as much as 50% in children. Now, they're both developmental disorders. Both of these things are, you're not born with good coordination, just as you're not born with concentration and attention and all of those things. They develop over time. So, you go through a process during childhood where you acquire these things, as also, by the way, your response to different sensory stimulations. So all of these things are developmental in nature. And what we see with a relative frequency with people with ADHD and the comorbid developmental coordination disorder is that they do get better. There's no question they get better. The way that the way that you manage or you teach these things is by practice, just as you do with development. Because it's what we're talking about is slow development. What you have to do is to go back to where the level that you are competent at, and then you have to take the next step to learn the next level of development. So, for example, if you were not able to ride a bicycle at the time that most other children were riding bicycles, you have those little wheels on the side, and then they come off, usually around about the age of 5 or 6, and kids learn to be able to balance on a bicycle and pedal at the same time. That takes an enormous amount of coordination, and people who have a delay in that area are going to need those little wheels on their bicycle for a lot longer. And sometimes they become embarrassed by having those wheels on their bicycle, and so they basically give up the bicycle altogether. So one of the things that I've done as a therapist is to take a much older child and a bicycle and provide a safe environment away from their friends, away from a major road, and in a nice soft place that they can basically learn to ride the bicycle in a place that's safe, because after all, it just takes practice to learn how to do that. And so that is the method that you need to take with other things. So you kind of need to go back to where you are comfortable, where you have the skills. And then when you're needing the next skill, you're going to have to find whatever is safe for doing that skill. You can learn these skills. Everybody can learn the skills. Will they be proficient in them? Maybe yes, maybe no. Depends, on how enthusiastic you are, how terribly important it is to learn these things. And the truth of the matter is that as one matures and grows older, we tend to choose to do some things and to do other things. So, and otherwise we just don't worry about it. So yes, absolutely, you can improve these things. And of course, it depends on which particular skill you're trying to develop. But it may take a lot of persistence. So one of the problems that I have working with children is that handwriting is a very sophisticated fine motor skill. And children with developmental coordination disorder are usually way behind in their ability to manipulate a pencil. And what happens in school is that the schools will go on trying to help children to write until about the 3rd grade. And after that, it's not how you write, it's what you write. They want to know, what you're trying to say. And usually what happens in school is they say, oh, forget writing, type it. And that's a great compensation, and it's a way of getting on, and that's wonderful, so long as you know how to type. And regrettably, the same teachers do not teach them how to type very often. But that's my point, is that there are alternative ways to do things, and we can compensate for things that we're not so great at.